Welcome to my getting started guide to the Mini 4 Pro. In this video, we're gonna go over everything from the controller, the drone, some of the software within the DJI Fly app, taking off on your first flight, some best practices that I like to do when flying a drone, some of the smart and creative features within the drone, including Active Track 360, hyperlapses, master shots, all that stuff and more in this video, so you're gonna wanna stick around. So with that said, let's get into it. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Devin, and in today's video, we're gonna be going over getting started with the Mini 4 Pro. Now this drone has been out for a few months now, and there's a couple other guides out on YouTube that you can find, but I wanted to try to condense it down to just what you need to know. Flying a drone for the first time, or if you're kind of new to it, can definitely be intimidating, and I want to try to make it as simple and fun as possible. So I want to try to condense down a video the best I can to help any beginners out there with learning how to fly a drone. DJI has made it so simple to learn that at some times when I'm making this video, it feels silly because it's like, they just made it so easy. You can literally just push a button and it'll take off, push another button and it'll land. But you can get way more out of the drone if you know the ins and outs of the controller, the drone, the software, some of the smart features, and all that fun stuff. And that's what I want to go over with you guys in this video. So whether you're new or maybe you are a seasoned drone pilot and you just want to hopefully pick up some new tips and tricks, hopefully you can find something of value in this video to help you on your way. You can definitely get lost in the weeds or way more in depth on all these subjects that I'm going to cover. For example, I've done a whole other video on how to get the most out of your drone when it comes to capturing cinematic quality footage out of the Mini 4 Pro, and I will link that here and you can go check that out. But like I said, in today's video, we're just going to keep it light and go over everything you need to know just to get started. So it's gonna be a good video, so let's get into it. All right, so when you first unbox the drone, and I've tried to do some unboxing videos and they just really haven't turned out well for me. So I'm not gonna waste your time with that. We're just gonna jump right into it. Everyone wants to check out either the drone or the controller first, depending on what you're more excited about. But this drone is really impressive. It is so compact and fits so nicely into a camera bag or the nice carrying pouch that you get if you get the Fly More combo. And yeah, the light form factor. It's so good for traveling. And as I've said in other videos, the best camera is the one you have on you. And the one you have on you is the one that you want to take places. And this one is easy to take places. It's actually kind of comical because we've gotten to the point where the controller is bigger than the drone. So I can stick this in a backpack, but then I got to find a place for this. So anyway, that's beside the point. When you first get the drone out, it folds out any way that you used to actually be able to mess it up. If you folded it the wrong direction, it would kind of get locked up on itself. But they've outsmarted the consumers and they've made it easier than ever. And you can unfold it in any order you want. You obviously have the propellers, which are held on by screws. And if you ever need to change those out, you're gonna need a tiny screwdriver. So definitely keep the one that comes in the pouch if you got one, or you're gonna wanna find a tiny screwdriver set. So in case that you need to change the props out or refresh them at any time, you'll see the 4 sensors on the top here that actually are wide angle and give you a full 360 sensor protection. It's pretty good. I've been scared a few times that it's not picking up something, but I haven't wrecked it yet. So we got that going. And then you've got the bottom sensors that help you land and sense things underneath the drone. You've got the battery, which you can just remove by squeezing the 2 buttons and removing the battery. And that is as simple as that. And then right above the battery, you have a USB-C port that you can use to charge. You've got the Fly More combo and you've got the multi-charging port. You also have that option to charge multiple batteries one at a time. It doesn't charge them all at once, so just keep that in mind. If you're looking to get them all charged, it's gonna do one at a time. But if you are on the go and you don't have the multi-pack or whatever it might be, you can just plug this right in and charge directly into the drone, which actually comes in handy. I've used that more often than I thought I would. That's been pretty nice. Right beside that is the micro SD card port. And so you wanna get a pretty good micro SD card to put in there. The drone does come with 2 gigabytes of internal storage, but that's That's not going to get you real far, to be honest. It does come handy in a pinch if you ever forget the card. I like to run the SanDisk Extreme 128 gigabytes, V30, A2. There's a bunch of little things on here, but I will link this in the description down below. But I've had a lot of questions about jittery footage or lag or whatever it might be in people's footage. And it's actually come down to not utilizing the right memory card. Definitely keep that in mind. You want a really good memory card that can shoot 4K at high speeds, and that's gonna be your best bet. So obviously in the front of the drone, you've got the camera and gimbal setup, and we'll go over that in more depth, but you can twist off the front element so you can put on ND filters. If you were wondering, the Mini 3 Pro lens is different from the Mini 4 Pro lens. So if you've got ND filters for the Mini 3 Pro and you're looking to upgrade, those filters will not work on the Mini 4 Pro. You're gonna want to get some new ones. So keep that in mind. That's pretty much all you need to know about the physical drone itself. There's little fans and vents to keep it cool. There's obviously lights when you turn it on, and those are for legality, just keeping everything kosher with the FAA. And then also for your line of sight to make it easier. Next up is I'm going to be covering the controller. Now I have got the DJI RC2. This was an upgraded option when purchasing the drone, but I was getting tired of using my phone and dealing with that. So when I knew it was time to get a new drone, I knew that this was on my wish list, and I'm so glad that I got it. This has been an absolute game changer. I've always used my phone forever. And the screen on this thing is so bright, and it feels like a real controller in your hand. You're doing something for real, and it almost feels kind of funny because at times this thing can get absolutely insane footage, but it feels like a toy just because it's so light. It's plastic, but then this is nice. Now, a lot of the features I'm going to cover on this will also be on the regular controller. Just it's going to be running through the DJI app on your phone, and the software on this is actually just running off of Android software. So it's basically just a phone in here, but it's all built in, really bright, and a fast processor, all that stuff. So if you're on the fence and you're considering getting this drone or another drone, this is compatible with other drones. So you can link it to other ones within the DJI lineup. But I would recommend getting one of these. And I actually put a little screen protector on here just because I don't always use the little carrying bag that they gave. I'll put it in a different camera bag, or sometimes just right in my suitcase if I'm not bringing a camera bag with me. And just wanted to keep the screen protected because it is bright. It's a really nice screen. So I do have a little screen protector, and you can't even really tell. So that's nice. So when you get the controller, as you look over it, you'll see that you have the antennas that you want to pop out and get the most range and reception out of your controller and your drone to communicate. Then the joysticks are actually underneath, and you just take them out and you can screw them right in. Just be careful not to drop them, especially if you're near water or gravel or rocks or something, because they're small and they could easily roll and be lost pretty easily. Now you can buy replacements, and I've actually ran into a lot of people, and I've done it myself, that actually fly without the joystick. Sometimes I just use the little screws or spikes right on there, and I get a more gradual and more controlled feeling control when using the controller. That was, how many times did I say control? Anyway, you just screw the joysticks on, and that's that. Now to turn on the controller, you push the on button once, and then again and hold, and it'll power right up. For you to really see and feel anything within the controller, you're also going to want to have the drone on. And to turn the drone on, it's the same order. The button right above the battery pack on the back of the drone there, you push and hold the same way. So push once and then hold a second push. All right, so once the drone is powered on, it should automatically link up. If you need to link, you can hit the connection guide in the bottom right corner, but it should link right up. What you want to do first is make sure to run any firmware updates that it says it might need, because what that's going to do is ensure that it works properly, but then also it can give you some pretty cool new features that they just release on a whim. So definitely check the firmware update. It should tell you right when you power it on, hey, there's a firmware update. Go ahead and run that. And so sometimes before I go shoot or before I travel, I will actually turn it on once or twice at the house just to make sure that everything's linked, everything's working properly, because you'd hate to get to a location and it need a software update or needs something, and maybe you don't have signal, and maybe this controller doesn't have signal. I've had to hook it up to my phone on a hotspot and do this thing, and that's no fun. So go ahead and update your firmware before you get somewhere while you're at home or at the hotel or whatever on the Wi-Fi, and that way you can have everything up to date. So once it's up to date, again on this screen, before you get into the actual drone flying menu, you can access your album, your profile. You can see a map of fly zones, and it can tell you where you're good to fly, where you're not good to fly, things like that. Then you also have access to basically like an owner's manual or a quick guide menu that can walk you through everything there is to know about it. So if you run into issues, you can get into that. But let's go ahead and hit the Go Fly button. And that's going to take you into the drone view and camera controls, all that fun stuff. We're going to be jumping all around the menu here, but let's start off with the top left arrow. That's the back arrow to go back to the main menu. It tells you what mode you're shooting in. It tells you whether takeoff is permitted or not permitted. The bottom left corner, you have a map view, so you can see exactly where you are on the map. You have the option to go ahead and take off right here from the controller. It'll show you your speed, your height, your distance, all that good stuff. And then on the bottom right corner, you'll see your storage, whatever you're shooting, photo, video, format you're shooting in, and whether or not you're in auto or pro mode or manual mode. And then on the right hand side, you're going to see again kind of the mode that you're shooting in, and that would be whether you're in photo, video, and then underneath photo and video, what mode of photo and video you're shooting in, whether you're in bracketing, normal mode, sorry, when I say normal mode, just single photo mode, bracketing, time shot, burst shot, different things like that. And then you have master shots, quick shots, panos, and all that fun stuff, which we'll get into in a little bit. And then on the top right, you've got your battery level, you've got how much time is left, you've got your signal strength, you've got obstacle avoidance warnings, you've got your satellites that you're connected to, and then you've got 3 dots. And we're gonna go into those 3 dots, and this is kind of the overview control of the controller and your drone. So you've got safety, control, camera, transmission, and about. I leave a lot of these on the standard out of the box mode, but there are a few that I'll change that I'll let you know. So on the safety page, it's basically asking you, hey, how do you want to go about obstacle avoidance right here at the top? And you either want it to brake and stop and just hold. You can bypass, which means it's gonna find something and then fly around it and get back on track. And then, or you can just have it turned off and you can run into things. I like to just leave mine on brake, and then that way I know that wherever it got hung up, it's gonna hang out there and I can easily go find it. If it's on bypass, then maybe it'll try to go around and then get lost again. But it does work. But again, that's just how I like to use it. I put it on brake, just leave it there. You can decide whether or not you want the display radar map. You can decide how you want your return to home to be, and set your return height. And that's always important to do. Say you're flying somewhere and you need to get up over an obstacle, then you may want something to get up above that height. So always remember, okay, if this needs to return to home automatically for some reason, then it should probably go above 90 feet and then come back over to me. And so it'll rise up to that if you're not already at that level, and then return to home. So that way it's not hopefully running into something trying to get back to you. You can go ahead and update your home point. So that's if you are walking or moving, and it'll remember the ground spot, or you can even assign it to your controller. So that way, if you're moving and you say, hey, my home spot is the controller, I'll actually do this multiple times, especially if I'm on a boat. Every few minutes, I'll just make sure, because we might be moving at 20 miles an hour or whatever it might be, and say, hey, I need to update the home spot. Go right in here and set it to the controller. And then that way it doesn't think it's thousands of feet away from home. And when it gets low on battery, it tries to race home. That's a scary situation that you want to try to avoid. You have AR settings, which will show you augmented reality of returning to home. So it'll show you a map, basically a trajectory of where it's heading and where it's going to land and all that fun stuff. You can set your max altitude. That way it doesn't go above that, and it'll give you a warning once it gets close to it. You can set your max distance. If you only want it to go 100 feet away from you, then you can set that, and that way it's kind of within your control. You can calibrate your compass, your IMU, and you can look at all your battery info. You can control your LED lights on the drone. You can go ahead and turn them off. I usually just leave mine on auto. If you're in a geo zone that needs to be unlocked, you can go ahead and do that, or you can see your unlocked permissions within here. And then if you do end up losing your drone, you can press Find My Drone, and it will basically ping it, and you can go find it, and best of luck to you. Hopefully it's in good shape and you can get back flying. Then under advanced safety settings, again, I don't really touch any of these, but just to go over kind of what they are. If the signal ever gets lost, you can set it to say just hover in place, and then you can kind of walk towards it until it reconnects with signal. It can descend or it can return to home. Mine's set on return to home, and then as it returns to home, it remembers that flight path of how it got there. And then on the way back, it usually connects at some point, and then I'll re-pick up signal. So that's another reason that you might want to reset your home point. And then it gives you some instructions on how to do emergency stops if needed. And then you've got vision positioning and obstacle sensing. I usually just leave that on, and that's again under advanced settings, so you kind of have to dig for some of those menus. All right, so going to the next tab here is control, and this one I do set up a little bit. Right at the beginning here, it gives you the options if you want to be measuring distances and heights in metric or imperial. I'm in America, so I prefer it on imperial. So under gain and expo tuning, you can set how fast everything is set to and how smooth your camera yaw and pitch and everything like that. Again, if you're just getting started, I wouldn't worry about a lot of these things. Leave it on the factory settings. As you get more experienced and as you get more particular about how you like it to shoot, then yeah, come back and learn some of those ways that you can fine tune pitch, roll, yaw, speed, all this stuff. That's a little more advanced. That's where you would go to control it and change some of those settings. Under gimbal, you can have it be set to follow mode or FPV mode. So if you like more of that FPV look and feel you want out of the camera and gimbal, and you can kind of mimic an FPV drone to an extent, you can recalibrate the gimbal. Next, you have the stick mode. I'm in mode 2, and that's your pretty standard stick mode. And that's where we're gonna go over here in a minute on flight controls and how to actually control the drone. But then you can also customize buttons. And I have done couple custom buttons, and I've actually set the C1 button to cruise control. And that's actually a pretty cool feature of this drone, is the fact that you can put this drone into cruise control. So once you get to a speed and a direction and everything that you want, you can just hit cruise control and it's gonna hold that exactly. And I've actually been wanting that for quite some time, and I wanna mess around with it more, but yeah, cruise control. Everything else I've actually left, so that'll be covered going over the controls. But everything else, you can actually customize some of those features if you want, but I leave mine on the factory settings. And then from here, you can recalibrate the remote control, and then you can even get into a flight tutorial. Now under camera settings, this also is something you might be changing more often than not, but you can at least see what you're looking at. So right now I'm in photo mode, and I can see whether or not I want to shoot in JPEG RAW or JPEG and RAW, the aspect ratio 4:3 or 16:9. Typically I like to shoot 4:3, and I like to shoot in RAW, and then I'll shoot in 4:3. That way you have more room on the top and bottom, and I can crop in the 16:9 if I want to. You can choose your resolution, 12 megapixels or 48 megapixels. The 48 does take way more space, as well as a little bit longer to process within the controller, within the drone. So just keep that in mind if you ever select it. Anti-flicker, I leave on auto. Histogram, I do turn that on so I can kind of read some of the light display that I'm shooting. Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's really bright or really dark out, just exactly how the light's hitting. So the histogram kind of gives me a point of reference to make sure that it's exposed properly. You can turn your peaking levels on and off. I like mine on low, and that way if I'm in manual focus mode, you can see an outline of what's in focus. But I don't want it too distracting, and I want it to be pretty particular about what's in focus, so I leave mine on low. Overexposure warning, sometimes I turn on in certain situations, but you can turn that on. It basically leaves zebra stripes on the video. It'll show you the spots of your image or video that's too bright. You can turn on grid lines, frame guides, which is actually pretty cool. If you're shooting horizontal, but you want to have a frame just in case for vertical format, you can actually frame that out and be like, oh, okay, everything's in frame for both. So you can always keep that in mind. You can set that to different aspect ratios. White balance, this thing does pretty good on auto, but typically I'll manually set it that way. It doesn't change mid-shot in photo or video. Between frames when it comes to photo, and then during video, I just want a continuous look. So I'll usually set that to 5600, which is pretty standard daylight. Underneath that, you can see your card space. You can change your file naming and your cache capacity. Now, if you're in video mode, you'll see slightly different menu options in here. You can choose whether you're going to shoot in normal, HLG, D-Log-M, your coding format, H.264, H.265. Now, typically I do run in H.265, and I'll either shoot in normal if I just want something fun for Instagram or whatever. But if I'm doing something that needs a little bit more work or color grading or just a little more quality, actually, because you only can shoot in 10-bit in log or HLG. In normal mode, you're only shooting in 8-bit. So it still has a ton of colors and it looks really good. Like I said, I use it all the time. But D-Log-M is going to give you that much more flexibility as well as quality. And then everything else pretty much leave the same as photos. Transmission, you can learn and see about your frequencies, your modes, your channel modes. If you wanted a live stream, you can connect things right in there. And then About has a bunch of information about your drone and controller. And so if you want to register your drone, that's where you can find some of the information that you need to tie your drone and controller to the FAA and kind of keep in line. So anyway, that is a quick overview of the DJI Fly app and all the features within it. A quick rundown of the outside of the controller is at your right finger, you have camera mode. You can switch to it and then use it to snap a photo. Left side, you have video mode, switch to it and start shooting. You've got gimbal control on the left wheel, and then you've got zoom control on the right wheel. And then you've got the custom buttons on the bottom. On the top front face here, you can change it from cine mode to normal mode to sport mode. You've got your return to home button, and then obviously your on and off button. All right, so now that we've gone over the drone and the controller, hang on. All right, so now that we've gone over the drone, the controller, and the DJI Fly app, hopefully you feel equipped and ready to go take your first flight. If you haven't already, what I recommend is going to find a place that's wide open, lots of room to fly a drone. You want to take off from a nice flat spot, go through the same procedures that we talked about before. Go ahead and turn the controller on, the drone on. If you haven't calibrated the compass in a while, maybe calibrate the compass and you just follow the instructions on the screen. But then from there, you should be ready to fly. I like to wait a few minutes to allow at least 10 satellites to get picked up, and that way you know that it's GPS locked and it should be a stable connection. If you take off before that, it may say no GPS warning or something like that. And that means you're gonna be flying more or less a little manually, where you're just gonna have to keep a little bit more control of it. So I definitely recommend letting the GPSs connect, let the whole thing warm up, and everything is running good. All right, so once you're ready to take off, there's two ways that you can do it. You can go ahead and push the takeoff button on the screen, and that's super easy. You just go ahead and hit the button once and it'll give you some instructions, and then you hold that button down in the middle and it'll go ahead and take off for you. And then it'll just hover. Or you can use the joystick method and you can point both the joysticks down and towards the middle, kind of diagonal, and that will start the motors. It won't take off yet. It'll just be laying on the ground, but motors are gonna be spinning. And then you're gonna use the left joystick to go up. and that'll raise the drone up right off the ground. Once you're off the ground, with the GPS lock on, you can totally let go of the controls and it'll just hover there. So you don't need to constantly be on the sticks or managing it like that with maybe some other drones. So from there, I would recommend just getting a little more comfortable with it. Maybe go up a little bit higher. Again, using the left joystick. If you're using mode 2, use the left joystick and push it upwards and figure out how fast and slow it descends. And that'll give you a feel for how the drone reacts. Sticking on the left joystick, if you go down, if you go down with the joystick, that is going to lower the drone's altitude. And then if you go right or left, that is going to physically spin the drone in place. Now moving over to the right joystick, if you go forward, that is going to take you forward. If you go backwards, that's going to take you backwards. And then if you go right or left, that is going to move the drone physically to the right and to the left on that axis. So that's the basic controls of the two joysticks. And I've got a whole other video on drone movements that I'll link somewhere here. And that goes over mixing some of these basic movements. And that's really the rule of thumb that I like to follow, is I like to keep my drone moves pretty simple. And that way they're timeless and they're always going to be good looking. So, but you still want to practice just how the joysticks move, how the drone responds, and start mixing some of those moves around and see how the drone reacts. So now that you're off the ground, you've learned some moves, you're ready to bring it home. Now you can manually go ahead and bring the drone home using the joystick controls, bring it down right in front of you, and then hold the left joystick down when it gets close to the ground, and that'll put it into landing mode. Or you can go ahead and push the return to home button, and that'll enter the go to home sequence. And on the Mini 4, you should see an augmented reality map of where the drone is actually going, the trajectory, and everything like that. And it's pretty cool. All right, so now you've got your first flight under your belt, and hopefully it was a fun one, and hopefully no wrecks. But maybe now you're ready for some more advanced moves. And that's what I was mentioning before, that maybe you want to go practice some drone moves using the joysticks and flying manually. Or DJI has made it even easier with master shots and quick shots. To enter master shots, you're gonna need to already be in flight, so I can't show you in the office. With master shots, it runs through a sequence of various drone maneuvers and compiles them into a little edit that you can go and use the whole thing, or where you can choose different parts and pieces of the master shots to use in your edit. So that way, if you can't decide, ooh, I want to use this one or that one, it's going to shoot a few of them, and then you can decide later. Now within quick shots, you can actually individually choose some of those shots that it did in master shots. How many times did I say shots? Anyway, but you can choose some of those moves and the drone will go ahead and do it for you. Now, what I would recommend is always make sure that you have plenty of room and plenty of space to see how the drone reacts the first time you do it. And then once you figure out the move and everything like that, then maybe you can do it more often. But I would just make sure, go test them out, practice them, and know how the drone reacts in most situations. Now, say that you just want to track a subject. They made it super easy that you'd actually just swipe on the screen within the app and it will detect the subject, whether it's a boat, a person, or a car. If you just want to track a subject, then they've made it easier than ever, and all you have to do is swipe down on the screen surrounding whatever item, and then from there, it's locked on. And you can choose whether you want to do points of interest, tracking, or other maneuvers, and you can arc around them, and you can set custom movements. And what's really neat about this drone is that, it may be one of the first times that I've ever seen it, but you can actually follow from the front. That was something I actually wanted to try on the Mavic Air 2, and it would kind of hold in the front for a little bit, but then it would fall behind. And that is the default. If this loses track, it will fall behind as well. So definitely have fun with some of those features as you learn how the drone moves and enjoy them. All right, so up until now, I haven't talked about photo or video settings. Let's dive into both of those quickly. Like I said before, I've got a whole other video on best settings for cinematic looking footage out of the Mini 4 Pro. So definitely check that out if you want more in depth. But in the bottom right quarter of the screen is all of your camera or video settings. So by default, it's probably in auto mode. So you can see what it's shooting right there. You can click on your storage. You can see if you're shooting to the drone or to a micro SD card. You can select your resolution and frames per second. I recommend 4K, either 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second in most normal situations. If you want some slow motion, I'll show you how to get there in just a second. You can do EV compensation if you want it to be a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, and this is all within the auto mode. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility, but I prefer to shoot in pro mode. So if you have any familiarity with cameras or other cameras and drones, then you may be ready to jump in. So with that, switch to pro mode, and now you have way more controls. And so under those same options, you can choose whether you want to do 4K and then the frames per second. You can set your white balance right within here. You can, again, choose your storage, but then you also have the option to change your color profiles within video mode for normal, HLG, or D-Log-M, and then also the file format. And then on the other half of that section, you can go in and you can set up your ISO, your shutter speed, and again, your EV compensation. To start recording, you can either hit the button right on the controller here, or you can hit the red record button on the screen. Now, next to the red button there, you also have the option to zoom in 1, 2, or even 3 times zoom. And above that, you have the option to change from horizontal mode to vertical. So if you're planning on shooting and sharing this on Instagram or YouTube Shorts, you might want to shoot in vertical, and you can do that right there. You can also do that on the back if you have the custom button set up. And then underneath those buttons, you have a manual focus option or an autofocus option. Above the red record button, you have, again, the option to change your modes. So within video mode, you can switch to night or slow motion. And again, you have the same settings underneath. You can go choose your frame rate and all that stuff. Now switching over to photo mode, which is just right above video, you have the same camera options all underneath, and you can set your shutter speed, your ISO, all that stuff right in there, or you can let it shoot auto. Now that's for single mode. You can also shoot AEB, automatic exposure bracketing, and that's going to take an exposure of 3 different brackets. Depending on how you have it set up, you could do up to 7 different photos, and it's going to take a light to dark, dark to light. And that way, if you want to do an HDR manually, you can blend those later in Lightroom or whatever photo editing that you like to use. So underneath that option, you have a time shot, and that's going to take a photo at every timed interval that you want. And that's one way that you could get into manually shooting time lapses, and you could get creative and do some other things with it, but that's how I've used it in the past. Then underneath that, you have a burst option where you could shoot a series of 3 of the same exposures right there, 5 or 7 in burst mode. So if you're shooting action sports or something like that, where something may change within frame, that will give you the option to have a few more frames, and so if you don't miss the action. Now going a column over, that's where, again, we were earlier with the master shots and quick shots. If you do hyperlapse, that kind of goes into the time lapse mode that I just touched on. The drone can just do it for you too, and you can go ahead and set waypoints, and it will fly a direction that you want, taking a series of photos. It can string it all together, make a time lapse for you, or you can choose to use those images as RAWs and shoot them and edit them yourself, and probably get a little bit more range out of them, but you have options there. And then underneath that, you have pano options, and there's a bunch of pano options within that. You can shoot full 360, you can shoot wide, you can shoot 180, and you can shoot vertical. So there you have it, guys. There is a quick overview of the Mini 4 Pro, the controller, the DJI Fly app, and how to utilize it all, hopefully. Again, this wasn't supposed to be a full in-depth of every function on the drone, more or less an overview, and that way anyone that wants to get started can hopefully get their bearings of what the capabilities of the drone are and how to utilize them and just how to get started. So if you want more in-depth videos, let me know in the comments. I'd love to make more stuff like this and share whatever I can with you guys to help you in your photo, video, and drone journey. But with that said, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned anything, if you found any bit of this valuable, please leave this video a thumbs up. It really helps out my channel. Until next time, I will see you in another video.